taking credit for other people's work. His last position in the company was Senior Red Team Specialist.
But we're the Red Team!
Again, suggesting he was doing some advanced security work, but if you look underneath it, you can see that he was doing social engineering. Keep this in mind, it'll become relevant very soon. While I'm presenting you all of this information in chronological order and with context, it's important to say that up until last year, everyone only ever heard Jason's side of the story when it came to his work for Blizzard, and it was a very different one than we got from his former coworkers.
So I worked at Blizzard for 7 years. I worked on everything from World of Warcraft Vanilla all the way to Overwatch. I didn't work on Burning Crusade. That was the only thing I didn't work on. I quit Blizzard because it sucked, dude. I quit Blizzard because it sucked. They paid me 36% of industry standard for my job. The working conditions were terrible. Working hours were terrible. It's a legendary company because people put legendary amounts of effort into it, even though they're under legendarily terrible working conditions. So I left, and I went to Amazon Game Studios, which is literally right up the street. It's 4 minutes away. And I got paid like a real human being.
This is a classic case of Jason lying by omission, because ever since he left Blizzard, he's tried to paint himself more as a dev. But in reality, he never, not once, worked as a dev for Blizzard. If him vaguely bringing up his work at Blizzard to mislead people into thinking he was a dev was a one-time thing, I honestly think it would be forgivable. But as this video posted on Livestream Fails shows, he did this all the time.
I was watching a video that was critiquing you for mentioning you work at Blizzard so much. I literally never talk about it. When I worked at Blizzard, I did that for Blizzard 7 years, yeah. Blizzard. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment. Used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, your red team specialist for Blizzard Entertainment, and Blizzard. Is having worked at Blizzard, I grew up at Blizzard.
Not only was he not a dev, but his failure at being a QA engineer is attested to by the fact that he held that position during the release of Blizzard's Diablo 3, which was so infamous for being full of bugs that it led to one of Boogie2988's biggest videos where he complained about it as his Francis character.
I spent all night trying to get the goddamn collector's edition. I stood in line at Walmart. I could barely stand up. I get in line. I can't even play my
Can you imagine being such a prolific lolcow that you give an area buff to other lolcows? Him cockroaching his way through Blizzard for years, despite being viewed poorly by his coworkers and not really achieving anything of note, eventually got people's attention, which prompted people to accuse him of being a Nepo baby, someone who only got their job or position or whatever because they're a family member of someone higher up in the company. His defense against these claims has been somewhat inconsistent.
Those who don't understand the term, a Nepo baby is somebody who got their job only through nepotism, never accomplished anything in their career, and never did anything to deserve the position that they have. My father was the cinematic director for Blizzard for 23 years. He worked on basically everything going all the way back to the death of Superman and many other games, all the way up until now. And then he quit. He went off to Jagex, and he worked on old school RuneScape, I believe as a creative director of some kind. With that in mind, he now streams on Twitch under the name of Earjoy. People think that I got my job at Blizzard specifically because of him. In reality, I only had help from him in order to do my resume. Aside from that, for the people who have this narrative, both myself and my brother applied at the same time. I got the job, and my brother did. I went to Blizzard in 2004, and this is kind of my whole career, right? My first job I got through nepotism, 100%. My dad worked at Blizzard for 23 years. He worked at Blizzard for 23 years, so I got a job there in 2004.
While it's true he immediately got a job working for Amazon Games once he left Blizzard, he was still not a dev, but instead an automation engineer. And even this only lasted for a few months. Shortly after, he got a job as a full-on cybersecurity specialist at Eagle Research Group. This job in particular has become a cornerstone for his claims that he's a bona fide hacker with mad skills. But is he really? Well, he was eventually so confident about his work there that he gave an interview about it, where he was asked what he actually did.
You're a hacker. That's where you kind of started.
An actual hacker.
An actual hacker.
Yes.
Not like I'm a hacker type. No, you're an actual
hacker.
Not a
kidding.
You won.
Like an actual hacker.
Yeah.
My last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United States Department of Energy. Drop of a hat, you were leaving on a plane tomorrow to fly to some state to test a thing, right? And my general wheelhouse controls physical access control systems, so breaking and entering, Wi-Fi related vulnerabilities, web related vulnerabilities, and social engineering. So those were my primaries when we were on those tasks. And they just fly us to a site, hack the site, write a report, go on. and I had to wear a suit the whole time, and they made me cut my hair.
However questionable it is for Jason to have worked on preventing breaking and entering in federal nuclear facilities, what really stands out to me here is that pesky little phrase, social engineering. While social engineering is very much an approach to gaining access to systems, social engineering basically means tricking people into giving you their access, and it can be done completely unrelated to any hardcore actual hacking. Regardless, he continually leads people on to think he's some kind of code wizard, usually bringing up the 3 badges he got from DEF CON.
So DEF CON 24, I had just won DEF CON 23, so I was on my team at the time, which is Council of 9.
For those who are unfamiliar with it, DEF CON is one of the most established conventions of the hacker community. But despite how much weight he puts on these badges, some of DEF CON's games fall in the same realm as any other puzzle, alternate reality game, or escape room event. What Jason is doing is tantamount to calling yourself a hacker because you looked at the source code of the Five Nights at Freddy's website to solve a puzzle. In this same interview, he explains that his social engineering at one of these DEF CON events was to lie and pretend like he was a volunteer at the event, all while collecting info on other teams' progress to give to his own team. Whether you think this is a fair strategy to win, or you think this is meta gaming, what's clear is that Jason wasn't breaking into any mainframes. He wasn't hacking the Matrix. Another lie of his during this interview is that he claims he was a federal contractor for the Department of Energy, which is false on multiple levels. He worked for a company which had a contract with the government, but as receipts procured by KF user Vic Macedonia show, this contract had to do with management consulting, which wasn't at all related to the kind of thing that Jason did. Even if you assume he just misspoke or abridged all of this context while speaking about it, he eventually made his lie a bit more explicit by claiming that his DEF CON badges got him a job offer directly from the government.
Went back home, hammered it for a whole year, and then went back to DEF CON the next year and won. And when I got my first black badge, it was like, hey, that's kind of cool, man. Because it's like the gold in the Hacker Olympics, right? I'm like, hey, that's pretty neat. And then I went and did it again the next year. And then people were like, wait a minute. And then the next year, the crypto challenge wasn't on. It was telefreaking, which is phone hacking. And then I won that. And then the government was like, do you want a job? And I was like, yeah.
The thing about that is, he's speaking about his 3rd badge here, which he won in August 2019. But he worked for Eagle Research a whole 2 years before this. On top of all of that, as tenuous as his claim to these badges already is, it gets even worse when you realize that he was just one of many people on a team. And the roles he consistently played never required him to do anything related to, actually hacking any systems. In an article about DEF CON 25, the game is described as basically a scavenger hunt for fake employee badges that had numbers on them. And then people would just use those numbers as the password for the system they were trying to access. In this article, Jason not only directly calls himself the leader of his team, but adds that he had no idea it was even a challenge, which is basically impossible. Throughout all of his time taking part in DEF CON, it doesn't seem he ever actually hacked into anything. Despite this, he saw fit to not only call himself a hacker, but to go out of his way to speak for that community, to be the Lorax for hackers, which culminated in him confronting the creators of the show Mr. Robot about their undue use of a puzzle from DEF CON.
All right, so the reason I don't like Mr. Robot. This right here is my write-up for the DEF CON 22 badge challenge. Went viral as hell inside of the hacking community. And it was because I listed out everything that we did as a team and showed the world the brilliance of Lost, who is the creator of these challenges. And the first thing you can see here is a number-letter cipher. So 1 would be A, 2 would be B, so on and so forth. And you can see at the end of this, these last pieces of 1057, 1057, Lost's name is 1057. He goes by Lost, and 1057 is his handle. That is his signature at the end of this. And now let's go to Mr. Robot's Twitter. Understand that this was the only place in the world that this was listed. Mr. Robot reposted this right here. That's that same string, but what did they leave off the end? His signature. This is the same as taking an artist and removing their signature from their piece of art. They made it public to millions of Mr. Robot fans. And those people went and found all of the breadcrumbs that led after this, which led to Lost's personal phone number. He got tens of thousands of calls from fans of Mr. Robot thinking Mr. Robot was running an ARG. And I stopped watching the show as a result. And they never took it down.
This would be bad if it were true. Once again, this is a case of Jason taking liberties with his storytelling. As it turns out, this lost person he's trying to white knight for here actually worked with the show as a consultant, a fact which was documented by DEF CON itself. and it wasn't even a secret. Additionally, the tweet from the Mr. Robot page is just a Caesar cipher, which is about as simple as you can possibly get with ciphers. And the subsequent ARG it leads to does not contain lost number like he falsely claimed. You know what does lead to lost supposed number though? Jason's Tumblr post, in which he publicly documented and shared the puzzle which contained lost number. Then, after sharing it on Tumblr, Jason went ahead and linked that post in his tweet and then made a video about it, further signal boosting the Tumblr post which contains the uncensored phone number. And he did all of this for no other reason than his own need to attach himself and his name to anything that may attract attention. He even used the walkthrough of Lost Puzzle as an opportunity to make a puzzle of his own to tack on at the end. Also, in this clip, he says this post went massively viral when this thing has just a little over 200 notes on Tumblr.
Went viral as hell.
I don't even know why he would lie like that about something that's publicly verifiable. This would be among the hundreds of little random lies he's told over the years, were it not for a couple of KF sleuths moved purely by their hatred of this man. To summarize all of his hacker background, pretty much everything he speaks about when he talks about his experience is a Frankenstein monster of other people's stories, whether it be the aforementioned Lost or random co-workers of Jason's whose positions were more interesting than his. But besides his odd jobs at Amazon and Eagle Research, once his Nepo baby plot armor wore off, Jason decided it was time to double down on LARPing as a game developer. So he started the company, and I use that word loosely, known as Pirate Software, which was supposed to produce games. He had a hard time keeping up the LARP when he gave interviews, as he had to admit that he had to learn how to use even the most basic softwares like GameMaker from scratch. Because, of course, despite his work at Blizzard, he never developed anything, nor did he know how to program to any significant extent. Funnily enough, in this same interview, he comments on how other indie devs fail due to getting straight into making their dream game and then taking forever to finish it, only for it to flop, when they could make a smaller game first to get the hang of it. In keeping with this theme, he made a game called Champions of Breakfast, supposedly in less than a month, a process he began with a Discord server. Apparently, the reason he did this was in order to build a community so that he could engage with and solve criticisms of the game, because, as he puts it, every single person you take the time to work with counts, because that person is going to exponentially increase the size of your community over time. If only he had actually applied this mindset at any point during his life and concerns himself a little bit with how he was perceived by others. Although Champions of Breakfast went out without a hitch to mostly positive reviews, even it is tainted with Jason's narcissistic delusions about his tech savviness. In this video, he actually thinks that he's solved all of piracy.
And if you look at this, we have 160 achievements for it, and all of them are very simple. The way that I did this is quite funny. I tried to find a way so that our game wouldn't get pirated because it'd be easy to pirate it. We knew that they could break Steam DRM very quickly. This is your save file. When you first start the game up, it actually checks what achievements you have, and it unlocks powers based on your achievements. This is actually the save file for the character, so you can't pirate it because you can never use the achievements. It made it unpiratable.
Now, some people have since taken up the belief that this was Jason purposely rage-baiting people to comment on how wrong he is about the game being unpiratable. However, I wholeheartedly believe he's exactly the kind of guy who's enough of a goofball, huffing his own farts, that he actually thought this would work. Of course, this little trick is extremely easy to bypass, but ultimately, Champions of Breakfast is just a stepping stone to the real story of Jason's work as a game developer. A game called Heartbound.
This isn't the work of a professional. This isn't even the work of an amateur. It's pathetic.
It's most likely that you've never heard of this game, and if you have, it's likely you only remember it for being one of the very few controversies that MatPat ever got involved in. Basically, he played the game on GT Live and packaged the video as the next Undertale, although the name of the game is clearly stated in the title, thumbnail, description, and throughout the entire video, making it clear that the video isn't him playing a game that's a sequel to Undertale.
I don't know if January is like the drama month, but I feel like there's already like drama and stuff that's already like coming out on YouTube and Twitter today. None of it revolves around us or has anything to do with us.
But I'm like, man, 2019, we're starting to do.
Jason took to Twitter to voice his displeasure with MatPat's treatment of the game, specifically complaining that MatPat didn't link the game in the description, used Undertale in the tags, and got the studio's name wrong. As this was going down, fellow YouTuber Gamer from Mars made pretty much the definitive video on the controversy, which ballooned to nearly 2 million views. In it, he points out that including the link of a game in the description is not at all standard practice, nor should anyone be expected to do it even for an indie game. And additionally, no one actually sees the tags tags on a YouTube video. For those of you who don't know what a tag on a YouTube video is, it's basically just a thing that YouTubers do on the back end to try and get their video seen in search results. All that MatPat did was add Undertale as a tag on the video because people who look up Undertale might have wanted to see MatPat play that game.
Top of the morning, ladies. My name is Jacksepticeye, and welcome to Undertale.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game.
The conclusion that Gamer from Mars reached was that this didn't at all constitute some kind of malicious clickbait, and the worst thing Matt did was getting the studio's name wrong. And even that has the caveat that this wasn't in the video's metadata, but instead happened in the video itself. While talking about it off the cuff, Matt simply didn't say the second word in the name of the studio, and instead referred to it as Pirate. Not only is this a complete nothing burger, words like software or studios are commonly left out when people are speaking about game dev companies. The developer of Borderlands is Gearbox, the developer of Doom and Quake is id, the developer of Payday is Overkill, and all of these developers have software in the name, but they're often referred to without it. Even companies with less common second words in their names like Square Enix are usually referred to by just their first name. There is seriously nothing to be mad about here, and the real reason this even got off the ground is because Toby Fox, the creator of Undertale, a game whose community already hated MatPat for his previous interactions with the game, chimed in and sided with Jason. When somebody as legit as a dev as Toby Fox criticizes you, it's only natural for people to side with them. And so, regardless of how small and petty this issue was, MatPat got dogpiled for relegating Heartbound to being an Undertale clone. The thing about this is, the person who's really responsible for making an Undertale clone out of Heartbound was Jason himself. The cover art with a kid character with a heart sprite sticking out, the reminiscent in-game art style, the boss who looks like a heavily mutated flower monster who then grows a bunch of eyes, the anthropomorphic animal characters, the morally gray protagonist, the engine being the same, even the title, Heartbound, is an anagram for Earthbound, a game which heavily inspired Toby Fox in the creation of Undertale, whose sequel, Deltarune, is also an anagram. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying that this is plagiarism. It's not like Jason just made an RPG Maker game. He absolutely made an Undertale-like game, but he takes issue with people pointing out how derivative his game is. Additionally, both Undertale and Heartbound were crowdfunded through Kickstarter with the same exact goal of $5,000. And it's here we see a few more signs that there was something very rotten at the very core of Heartbound. For example, as soon as you get to the About section of Undertale's page, Toby lists out all of the games Undertale is similar to, despite being ultimately original. On Heartbound's page, the glaring similarities between it and Undertale are never mentioned, despite Heartbound being announced within 1 year of Undertale's release. In fact, Jason does the opposite on Heartbound's website, where he remarks on how innovative and unlike other RPG games Heartbound truly is, because of its use of unconventional mini-games during combat that allow for the fights to be settled in multiple different ways. That is literally the main mechanic of Undertale, the attack, act, and mercy systems, which work off of the bullet hell mini-games that are unique for each opponent you're facing. Another interesting element of Jason's Kickstarter page is he explained how he purposely set the asking price of the Kickstarter to an amount that he thought would trick game journalists to report on it as if it were a rising star phenomenon. This raises a few questions as to how organic this project was, but nevertheless, this is what he had to say once the goal was met. The next step was proving to everyone who invested in our game that we're not going to run away with their money, because that's a big problem for Kickstarter games. People go and throw their money at a Kickstarter, then the devs will disappear for 2 years, then come back and make something that wasn't up to par compared to what they promised on the Kickstarter. So we thought, what if we streamed it all? Everyone could watch us build our entire video game. Full open development. They could see every single thing that we ever do, and no one ever can say the devs ran away with the money. At the same time, the stream helps fund additional development on the game, so even though we put the Kickstarter to such a low amount, we're still getting funding to continue the process of building Heartbound. It also gives an extra added effect to where, if in the future anyone tries to come around and say we stole their idea, we have 300 episodes of video evidence showing how we made the game ourselves that no one can contest. Usually on the stream, a lot of the questions we get are usually the same. When is the game coming out? How much is it going to cost? What is the game about? I have commands I can use on stream that let everyone know the release date and all the information they need. I can drop !demo in chat and it shows them. It mitigates a ton of my time every day because we stream 10 hours a day, and during that 10-hour period, it's literally just question and answer while everything else is going on. Now, there's a lot to pick apart from this post, but the gist of it is that Heartbound is an elaborate excuse for Jason to stream for literally dozens of hours with no end in sight. Him mentioning streaming as being something to justify the low amount asked on the project is really dishonest, because even if we just use Undertale as an example, Toby never acts like $5,000 is a low amount. It's a reasonable amount for this kind of game, even if he ultimately got way more than what he asked for on his project. But we don't need to only compare it with Undertale, as there are plenty of other predecessors in this general genre that Heartbound can be measured against. Ebe, Mad Father, Yume Nikki, Aoni, all of these were not crowdfunded, and at least initially were released for free. And not to mention, these games were actually finished and released to wide acclaim, whereas the same cannot be said about Heartbound. Lastly, I really like that Jason feels the need to express his concern about the game being accused of plagiarism, but once again doesn't mention Undertale. When he does mention Undertale, however, while he does express his admiration for it, he pairs it with a little bit of criticism of the game's code.
Undertale is made by Toby Fox. Undertale is a brilliant goddamn game. It's very good. It's also coded like shit, and that's fine. If you look at the decompiles that people have done of Undertale, you'll find that there are rooms that have hundreds of if statements checking the same value, then it sets it to 0, then it checks it again before doing anything. Meaning all of those if statements did nothing except for take processing time. There are sections of the game that show, like, oh, here's an example. All the dialogue in all of Undertale is in a single switch case statement in one object. It's thousands and thousands of cases long. Single object, all of the dialogue in the game. Hard-coded into that object. Insane. Insane behavior. But it doesn't matter.
He says in this clip that it doesn't matter, that the game is coded this way because it's good anyway, but what he doesn't mention is that the real reason it doesn't matter is because Undertale is a teeny tiny 2D pixel art game. Optimization is for the birds at that point, since unless you're trying to run the game on a calculator, it's not going to be lagging and frame dropping. But honestly, I don't even think he's actually trying to critique the game's code here, as much as he's trying to use this little factoid in order to present himself as someone who's really code savvy.
Sean Parker. Oh, he's wired in. That's what I'm talking about.
But is he very code savvy? Due to the majority of his audience being people who generally aren't too familiar with programming, no one ever had much of a reason to doubt him whenever he spoke about code. But eventually the code for Heartbound was actually extracted from the game, and some people who aren't restarted, like me, started going through it, only to find out that it was as sloppy as it gets. First, they pointed out that Jason made constant use of something called magic numbers, meaning that things in his code aren't referred to by shorthand names like coffee_obtained, but instead just numbers like 201. The obvious bad side effect of this is that this means whoever is working on the code, in this case Jason himself, has to know and remember what each of these numbers mean. Otherwise, he'll have to click through and find out every single time he forgets one of them.
The numbers! What are they saying?
The other side effect of this, although it's possible this was Jason's original intention, is that it makes working with other people on the code nearly impossible, since only Jason will be able to read and navigate his code. I noted that this may be his intention because not only does it make for a good explanation as to why he's the only person who actually works on the game's programming, but his code being completely unreadable makes it more impressive for the beginner programmers he tailors his online content towards.
An idiot admires complexity. A genius admires simplicity. An idiot, anything the more complicated it is, the more he will admire it. If you make something so cluster he can't understand it, he's gonna think you're a god, because you made it so complicated nobody can understand it.
There are other bizarre code lies, like Heartbound being supposedly ray traced in a highly efficient manner, but once again, more code-savvy people took notice that in some of the game's updates, Jason makes notes for having to manually fix in-game characters still casting shadows when a light source has been shut off, which in the case of an actually ray-traced game would be impossible to happen, even as a bug. An example of a 2D game that actually has advanced lighting mechanics is Intravenous, and it should be immediately obvious by just looking at his gameplay and then looking at Heartbound gameplay that they are definitely not the same. Captain Garbage, the same KF user who questioned the ray tracing claims, went through more of Jason's code only to find that the entire game relied on extremely long arrays and switch cases, which was actually quite similar to the code of Undertale, which Jason criticized. I'll probably butcher this explanation, but this basically means that Heartbound, a game heavy on branching dialogue and minor decisions altering the course of the story, has each in-game event tied to an unbelievably long string of every in-game event that leads up to it and comes as a consequence consequence of it. In turn, the longer the game goes on, every time your past decisions will affect what'll happen next, all of those cases have to be checked, as they haven't been collapsed into something easily readable. Worse yet is that were Jason to ever go back and alter something he's written, he'd then have to go look for each instance where his code is duplicated, which may be happening dozens of times throughout the entire game. Now, the alternative presented by Captain Garbage is ironically called JSON, or JSON, which is exactly fitting for the kind of game Jason is making, and would allow for other programmers to have an easy time working on Heartbound, if that was ever his intention. Now again, I'm making my way through this explanation by the skin of my nuts here, and if you want better breakdowns of how bad his code is, other much more skilled people have already gone over that. But the key takeaways here are, firstly, it looks like Jason tried to make his code inefficiency similar to Undertale's, although he manages to outdo it. And secondly, this degree of amateur work is a sledgehammer to the reputation he built as some kind of programmer savant who hacked nuclear facilities or whatever. This isn't just inefficiency. This is slop of such nightmarish proportions that multiple people have pitched in to point out just how bad it is.
Dude, I really hope that Pirate Software code stream screenshots are like just very early rough drafts of what he's trying to do. I usually do something like that to get the idea out and then I refine it, so I hope that's what I'm seeing. Otherwise, I'm better than him.
Literally anything would be an upgrade over what is written here.
Seeing Pirate Software code is like those images of streamers trying to craft nonsense in Minecraft.
Either a web of lies or a web of his shit code.
Despite a lot of the criticism he's gotten, Jason has gone on to continuously claim that his code is efficient and easy to work on, and the only thing that really took time was writing the game story-wise. Funnily enough, he mentions here that part of why it takes him so long to write is that he does it in 6 languages, and he reworks every single puzzle and joke in a game in all of these languages. And him saying this is a one-of-a-kind combination of an insane lie and an implicit confession. The insane lie is obvious. He doesn't simultaneously write the game in 6 languages. He writes the game in English, and then if someone who speaks a different language wants to translate it, he's cooperative with it. The implicit confession part is that the reason why it's so difficult to translate his game is the previously mentioned switch case issue. Because all of the branching paths are interconnected and dialogue options don't get collapsed into values that can be easily checked, whenever you edit what's written in a dialogue option, you have to go through the entire game's code to alter every other instance affected by that dialogue option, otherwise the game completely breaks. I know I've spoiled it a bit, but it shouldn't be surprising for you to find out that the game has remained an unfinished mess to this day. The original estimated delivery of the finished product on the Kickstarter was November 2017, but as that deadline approached, the game's website updated to state that the new date was in early to mid 2018. Then it was just 2018, no early to mid. And right beneath this question, he has some other entry stating that there will never be any DLC or sequels because he wants people to just get the entire story, saying that to even discuss a sequel would diminish what Heartbound could be at release. Then, in December 2018, the game comes out, and there's only 2 chapters out of 5. The 3rd chapter remains incomplete to this day, and monthly updates consist of minor bug fixes and irrelevant additions that don't get the game anywhere near completion. It took years for the game to even get a quit button so that you can close it without having to press Alt and F4, and it's still without volume sliders. The degree of abandon here is yandere dev tier, the Ozymandias of Undertale clones. Now, there can be arguments made that he's taking so long to finish it because he's the only one really working on the game, as the other people who are credited are an artist and a composer, and neither of them are programming it. But one counterpoint to that is exactly what we've been talking about up until this point. The reason no one else works on it may be that no one else can work on it due to how convoluted and horrific working on this thing can be. The other counterpoint is that Undertale, which was also made by one guy, with only the occasional help of an artist for visuals and such, and was also crowdfunded, was fully finished and released just 2 years after its Kickstarter campaign. You can also bring up Toby's other game, Deltarune, since it also released in chapters, but even then, the first 2 chapters released in late 2018, and now there's already chapters 3 and 4 out of a total of 7. That's 4 chapters in 7 years. And I should note that the first 2 chapters of Deltarune are completely free. We don't need to keep it confined to Toby's games either. Stardew Valley was made in under 5 years by a single dev. Braid was made in 3 years by a single dev, with only the help of a paid freelance artist. The first 7 Five Nights at Freddy's games, or 8 if you count FNAF World, were all made by a single guy. The answer as to why Jason's game is going on 10 years strong as an unfinished mess is simple. He's streaming instead of working on the game. Now, Jason really had no excuse for his lack of work on the game in 2019. However, ever since 2021, he started repeating a mantra that he had lost a whopping 9 months of development during the year of 2020 due to coming down with the big virus. Apparently, his illness was so awful that he suffered permanent lung damage and has to use an inhaler for the rest of his life. But once again, we come to the same question. Is this really true? Although Jason maintains this reasoning to this day, one user, named Musashi's son, begged to differ. By diligently going through his entire tweet history from 2020, we can see that in early 2020, Jason got sick twice, once in January and once in March, and both times he saw an immediate improvement within a few days. In the March case, he went to the hospital and got diagnosed with pneumonia, which was later confirmed to actually be bronchitis. But regardless, he made it clear on Twitter that he was tested for COVID and that it came back negative. He does indeed mention that he'd been using an inhaler for his bronchitis, and although beating it was tough, he was back to his normal self and streaming by mid-April, releasing another minor update to Heartbound in May. In both instances of Jason being sick during the year of 2020, it actually affected his ability to stream, which makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that although he beat his bronchitis in early April and made an update to the game in May, explaining that he lost about 2.5 months of work up until that point, there's no update for June, despite him streaming 13 days in June of 2020. If anything, while you recover from a respiratory issue, it should be easier to program than to stream. Yet he seems to only be capable of the latter. Then, all of a sudden, in July, he changes his story and claims it was COVID all along, with no mention of a new diagnosis or having gotten sick again, so it's clear he's talking about the illness he suffered from March to April that year. Fast forward to November 2020, and he completely retcons his original story, bringing us to a new timeline. He has been recovering for 8 months. Fast forward to 2021, and we get to the previously mentioned claims of having lost not 8, but 9 months of production to COVID. Keep in mind, he was streaming for 10 hours a day through the crushing majority of 2020, with no problem. Yet he couldn't work on the game? In a clever little boundary push, 9 months eventually turn into nearly a year. But after this latest development, Jason backs away from the COVID claims for the majority of 2022. Then, in June 2023, he goes on Twitter to announce that he has COVID, but this time, it only takes him 20 days to recover from it fully.
That was a hell of a thing. That's the second time I've gotten COVID. The first time took 9 months to recover. This one took probably about, I think it was in total about 20 days. So thankfully I'm back on it, and I'm back to working on stuff, so I'm sorry that there's no update, but I will see you guys all later.
While the first supposed COVID case is mired in lies, this second time is a lot more believable and has remained pretty consistent. Well, up until Jason decided to retcon it once again.
My recovery was about 2.5 years, so I got long COVID. My lungs shut down at one point. I almost died. They had me in and out of the ER for a long time. I can actually show you this in data. Kind of wild. You can go to streams. I used to stream 7 days a week back in the day. And right here is where I went to DreamHack in January 2020, and I got COVID. And you can see what happened to my stream schedule. There were like months where I just streamed like 3 days.
This is from 2024, so over the course of 4 years, a bad case of bronchitis in March 2020, which took about 2 months to recover from, and a not-so-bad case of COVID in June 2023 that took 20 days to recover from, became one huge case of long COVID that started in January 2020. Here is the proof that Jason offers for this. He shows that his streaming schedule was pretty spotty during 2020, which could also be explained by him being lazy. But besides Musashi's in-depth analysis of Jason's history of lies, another sleuth took the time to go over literally dozens upon dozens of hours of Jason's streaming during 2024 to see how much he actually works on Heartbound. I mean, he calls them dev streams, so he must get a lot done, right? Well, over 164 hours of streaming, he attempted to work on Heartbound for 15 minutes. 15. And I say attempted because all of those 15 minutes consist of him trying to open Game Maker and then something going wrong until he gives up and goes to do something else. Instead, he works on other random passion projects that he will never finish, or he plays Path of Exile, or he plays World of Warcraft for literally dozens of hours. At one point, he streams WoW for 24 hours straight. When people who are familiar with him and his streams point out how little he works on his game, he always responds listing all of the things he's extremely busy with, adding that he works on Heartbound every day, when this is probably not true. But despite their similarities, Jason is no yandere dev, and the reason I say that is because he is much worse. Not finishing his game is actually one of his lesser offenses. After years of toiling away at his streams, in 2023 he began going viral on YouTube as clips of him started being uploaded. This is how the majority of people came to know him, and during this time, the consensus opinion on him was that he was a pretty good guy. People had no reason to doubt his credentials as a game dev and a savvy hacker, at least they didn't have a reason yet. By March of 2024, an interesting community decided to take notice of Jason. They were users of a subreddit that was focused on the MMORPG EVE Online. and they were accusing him of being an arrogant, pathological liar due to their experiences with him in-game. However, due to the fact that these people were concentrated in this specific games community, it failed to get any real traction. What people did start picking up on en masse is his voice, which sounded oddly deep in a very unnatural way. This was his explanation for it.
Went back to the doctor. Doctor's like, hey, sometimes in your early 30s, your voice can change as a man, and it's effectively second puberty. This is what I used to sound like. That's what I used to look like to 5 years ago. Wait for this. This is awful.
My hot dogs are freshly picked. I'm gonna have to peel it. I'm gonna have to peel my hot dog.
Yeah, that was it, dude.
Every good hot dog needs to be peeled.
Even if you buy into this second puberty thing, is it believable that it happens over the course of just 5 days? Because this is a clip of him speaking from May 11th of 2019.
Is this live stream of Chair Jam? It is. I just finished my chair. I'm ready to submit to the judges. I want to thank all of you guys for being here for, my chair building experience.
And this is a clip of him speaking from May 16th of 2019.
Donut? Oh my god, look at the donut. Oh, that is a powerful donut. Look how strong these donuts are.
But in fairness, in the first clip, he clearly is in an unconventional streaming setup, so you could excuse it on that basis. The thing is, there are plenty of other clips where he's in his regular streaming setup, and it still sounds noticeably less deep and bassy.
The egg exploded. It blew up like a grenade. And the door of the microwave blew open. The door of the microwave blew open from the force of the egg exploding. And
the way that it sounds like it's peaking whenever his voice gets particularly bassy suggests that he at least has some kind of EQ that's really boosting the low end of his voice. Well, this has always been a topic of discussion, not just for Jason's detractors, but also his fans. Eventually, KF user Yats actually looked at the spectrogram of an interview Jason gave, and he noticed that whenever the audio consists exclusively of Jason talking, there is a very noticeable hole in the mid-range, almost as if he's lowering them out of existence. This can't just be a noise filter, because he still has high end on his voice, so his S's don't sound weird. This absent mid-range is not there whenever anyone else on the panel speaks. Additionally, there's a few clips of him where it sounds like whatever he has on his audio is struggling to function.
I don't know what that gives me, though.
What is that supposed to do? How am I gonna put that shit in there?
Oh. Now keep in mind, his audio going out may just be compression to prevent his audio from being too loud. But the way his voice is crackling sounds a bit like how Formant sounds when you use auto-tune.
What is that supposed to do? How am I gonna put that shit?
Obviously, he's not auto-tuning his voice to any particular note, but what he could be doing is using an auto-tune-based software like Throat, which can make your voice deeper without necessarily changing its notes. Outside of digital alteration, I haven't seen many people point this out, but it just sounds like he's trained his voice to sound more like that. One of the few times I did see someone remark about this was on Reddit, where someone said that he went from Peter Griffin to Brian Griffin, and indeed, he did.
My name is Jason Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I am my own studio, Pirate Software.
The way he over-enunciates and projects his voice sounds like how a conventional voice actor can sound, and Seth MacFarlane, the guy who voices those characters, can sound like that, although he doesn't force his voice to be deep all the time.
It has nothing to do with the fact that it's a black show. What, I can't be tired at 1 in the morning?
Further solidifying this possibility is that basic self-training in voice acting is incredibly common in communities such as the furry community, which Jason was a part of. You may be aware of the fact that there are a few furry VTubers and such who do these kind of cartoonish voices, which are often also digitally altered, all of which is fitting to Jason's case. The thing is, it's not standard for this kind of VTuber to lie about their vocal training and using voice changes. As a matter of fact, plenty of them teach others how to do it.
Hi, my name's Reniko. And I may not seem like it, but I'm a professionally trained voice actor who happens to be a VTuber.
None of this would even be a problem per se if Jason didn't lie about it. But then again, the crushing majority of Jason's problems wouldn't exist if he didn't lie. So I guess that's really pointless for me to say. Alternatively, there is another explanation, which is that Jason just recently hopped on testosterone, and he's going to be yoked out of his mind real soon. Now, even with people being skeptical of his voice, it didn't seem it affected his ability to be popular online. But as time went on, he became increasingly vocal when it came to his opinions on video games. Actually, allow me to correct myself. His expert opinion on video games, because as he repeatedly put it wherever he could, he was an actual expert on everything video game related and everything cybersecurity related. Why? Because he used to work at Blizzard Entertainment. But keep in mind, he never really mentions it.
I literally never talk about it. When I worked at Blizzard, I did that for Blizzard. Blizzard, 7 years, yeah. Blizzard. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment. Used to work at Blizzard Entertainment. You're red team specialist for Blizzard Entertainment. And Blizzard. Is having worked at Blizzard. I grew up at Blizzard. Blizzard, industry for Blizzard Entertainment. Blizzard. Yeah, no, I worked at Blizzard.
Of course, he neglects to mention that he worked QA and never developed a single game in his life until he left Blizzard, and he even likes to conflate the time he worked at Blizzard with the time he spent working other jobs, resulting in him frequently saying things like, "I've been in the games industry for 20 years.
So I've been a hacker for about 20 years. Started in Blizzard as QA, but I was a hacker then. As a programmer, I've been doing this for about 20 years. I've been a hacker for 20 years. You will be found. And that's coming from a hacker of 20 years. 20 years. Don't do that shit. Don't. I've been working in programming now for about 20 years. But yeah, I've been doing this for about 20 years. For those of you who are new, my name is Thor. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I've been in the gaming industry for 20 years. My name's Thor. How's it going?
20 years. Huh. Kind of reminds me of another guy who did 20 years. Although you'd never hear a peep from him about it either.
I did 20 years.
Anyway, Jason used his fake reputation as an expert in the games industry to give opinions on matters that he knew nothing about. For example, he weighed in on the Assassin's Creed Shadows controversy.
Yeah, honestly, I have no respect for identity politics, trying to cancel a video game or cancel a story. If you want to cancel the story of the color of a character's skin, you have no business being here.
Alright, so without getting into too many details about it, the Assassin's Creed Shadows controversy goes far beyond just the protagonist, Yasuke, being black. More so, it has to do with Ubisoft completely misrepresenting the story of the real Yasuke, as well as doing things like having hip-hop music playing whenever he engages in combat, which people reasonably found was kind of an insane decision.
Kill him.
Of course, getting into the mire of the discussion isn't nearly as attractive to Jason as having a punchy stream clip for YouTube Shorts where he can virtue signal. The most unbelievable part about Jason's clip is how he follows it up.
I don't give a shit about the color of your skin. I don't care about where your spawn point was. I don't care about where you were born.
Referring to people's birthplaces and ethnicities as their spawn point is a kind of peak Reddit gamer cringe I have not had the displeasure of witnessing for the past decade. This is up there with the Walmart gamer t-shirts. Actually, those are kind of badass. I like those. Later on in the same clip, he halfway acknowledges that there's more to the discussion than just Yasuke being black, but then shoots it down, reinforcing that what people are really concerned about is Yasuke being black.
But don't stop others from playing the game because you don't want to see a black guy in the cover. Who gives a shit? And if that's the only thing you're hung up on, and you're trying to make it about Japanese history, despite Japanese history disagreeing with you, you need to look in a mirror instead of posting on Twitter.
It's like he's physically incapable of considering there may be something beneath his surface level understanding of an issue. But honestly, that's quite on brand for him. Whether it be game development or hacking, Jason has a chronic allergy to going past surface level knowledge. But this doesn't stop him from commenting on everything. Another case of Jason's extreme tone deafness and inability to read the room was his brief online campaign against something called spy.pet. Again, this drama goes a lot deeper than I care to get into here, but in early 2024, there was a significant online upheaval against boy kisser communities hiding in plain sight on Reddit and Discord. These communities were known to attract and harbor a lot of people who not only publicly fantasized about preteen boys, but also shared illegal material involving kids. One of the tactics deployed against these people was the use of something called spy.pet, which used bots to scrape through over 14,000 Discord servers, which exposed how vulnerable Discord really was. On April 19th, a journalist named Joseph Cox wrote an article about spy.pet being weaponized by Kiwi Farms, but neglected to mention that this weaponization was specifically targeting the boy kissers. Instead, the article claims KF was targeting a queer community on Discord, not specifying which or why. Now, you'd think that this would be the moment for someone like Jason, hackerman aficionado, to have a criticism of Discord's management for, exposing their users like that. Or at least he'd have the wits about him to simply stay out of it, given the very controversial nature of this incident. But instead, he did what he always does. He went off half-cocked with insufficient information and began openly and unilaterally antagonizing spy.pet as if this was a clear-cut case of malicious hacker activity and not the reality of Discord operating with a massive and exploitable hole. a hole which was in the basic security of their servers. Of course, Jason 2 provided no context as to what exactly Spy.pet was being used for. In this case, his stupidity prevailed, and his method of getting rid of all Spy.pet bots was quickly adjusted for, as the people behind it simply switched the account IDs to something else and bypassed his brilliant security mechanism. He then had to go over to his Twitter to issue a retraction and announce that this method should be abandoned, as it would result in the banning of innocent people who had nothing to do with the Spy.pet bots. Eventually, Discord did something to prevent more Spy.pet situations from happening, signifying they could have done something all along and just didn't account for it. Due to the obscurity of this little blunder, he didn't catch very much flack for it, but unfortunately for Jason, he was about to do the most violent Sideshow Bob routine of continuously stepping on rakes that hit him in the face that the world has ever seen. But in order to get to the meat and potatoes of the controversy that led to Jason's ultimate downfall, we have to start with the appetizer. All the way back in 2019, Ross from the YouTube channel Accursed Farms made a video titled "Games as a Service is Fraud." If you don't know who Accursed Farms is, you are hereby a certified baby and you are legally entitled to a pacifier. All the way back in 2007, when dinosaurs and giants still roamed the earth, Ross began his online career with a series of videos where he gave a voice to the protagonist of the Half-Life games, Gordon Freeman.
I'm not the only one who's late. Sucker!
Ever since then, he has cemented himself as a staple of the YouTube gaming community. And despite not being a huge channel per se, he's earned people's respect in kind of a similar way that someone like Angry Video Game Nerd has.
Oh my god, it's Bugs Bunny!
An OG of the community that has never switched up. With this reputation in mind, Ross pledging his allegiance to the cause of opposing games as a service was significant. To put it in layman's terms, games as a service means the companies that develop games have the power to completely eliminate a game from existence and prevent anyone from keeping it alive. In some cases, this means making it so that a multiplayer game can only be played on company servers and then shutting those servers down. In other cases, this means ceasing the sale of an older game both physically and digitally, but still going after anyone who tries to make the game available online. Most recently, an example of the latter is intellectual property laws and government institutions being weaponized against ROM sites by gaming companies, despite plenty of the games these sites provide no longer being sold by said companies. Despite not making any money off these games anymore, they still want to prevent anyone from quote-unquote pirating it, which ultimately pans out to be erasing the game from history and going after anyone who stands in their way. The specific focus of Ross's video is criticizing the legal concept that all purchases of games, digital or physical, constitute the purchase of a license, not of a product. And the company is free to end that license whenever they want to. You can get into the weeds of intellectual property laws while discussing this, which I'm going to avoid doing, but it's hard to not be sympathetic towards these efforts to conserve games, as well as all other digital media, especially if you play games or care about art at all. Now, 5 years after Ross posted this video, he made a new one on the same topic, this time announcing the largest campaign ever to stop publishers from destroying games. This campaign was called Stop Killing Games, and it outlined a few strategies to get the ball rolling legally on the subject of video game preservation and consumer rights. Although there were many different ways to do so, one that is highlighted is the European Citizens Initiative petition, which could get the subject discussed in the European Parliament. In the description of the petition, it states, "The initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers, before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. The initiative does not seek to acquire ownership of said video games, associated intellectual rights, or monetization rights. Neither does it expect the publisher to provide resources for the said video game once they discontinue it, while leaving it in a reasonably functional or playable state." Now, while this description doesn't delve into impressive and wordy legalese, the petition really couldn't be clearer on what it aims to accomplish. This was not enough for Jason, who, in early August of 2024, voiced his displeasure with the initiative. First, during one of his 10-hour streams, which got so much backlash that it's since been taken down, and then on Twitter, where he doubled down on it, saying the following: "Stop Killing Games is a vaguely worded attack on live service games as a whole, instead of being a focused assault on taking down the niche practice of single-player games, including always online functionality that can cause the game to be shut down at a later date. If you want my support, then write better legislature." I can't help but but bring up this classic.
You can say, "I like pancakes," and somebody will say,
"So you hate waffles?"
"No, That's a whole new sentence. What are you talking about?
The obvious problem here from the start is Jason calling the petition legislature. The petition is not legislature. It's a formal request for the drafting of legislature. It clearly does not at any point present itself as a ready-made law. So you gotta wonder why Jason acted this way. Although I'm sure he had talked about it previously, this is him talking about it on one of his streams from this time period.
As written, the language is too vague. It doesn't solve the root issue, and it creates a litany of new issues. And that's a problem. That's the major issue for me. So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically, we don't want single-player games to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. The way that they're going about it is using very vague language that makes it so that even live service games could be caught in this net.
Once again, he is simply presenting his telephone-gamed understanding of the initiative as if it were, in fact, the contents of the initiative. Get used to it. We're gonna see a lot of that. Unlike what Jason is saying here, the digital rights management, or DRM, of single-player games doesn't need to be removed or even radically altered. The companies who own the games just need to provide means for the players to keep playing it. In the case of single-player games, it mostly means still having it easily available for purchase in digital form, which requires no extra effort or cost of maintenance for the devs. As a matter of fact, it will continue to make them money as people keep buying the game. This alone would be a major source of relief for game preservation, since this is the brunt of the controversy revolving ROM sites being taken down, as retro games become increasingly hard to officially acquire, whether digitally or physically. But to Jason's point, there is the odd case that cuts closer to DRM, such as the original GTA trilogy, which got replaced by their retarded definitive edition versions that look and play completely different, which many people reacted extremely negatively to, and for good reason. In this case, the delisting of the original games and their subsequent replacement had to do with, for example, licensing issues with the in-game's radio music. But again, Rockstar could have simply continued to remove songs that they'd lost the rights to, as they were already doing before the definitive edition fiasco, and left the rest of the game intact, so even this isn't a particularly good example. We haven't even gotten to Jason's point of contention with the initiative, and he's already misrepresenting it. This is what he actually thinks is wrong with the initiative.
The way that they're going about it is using very vague language that makes it so that even live service games could be caught in this net, which means every multiplayer game gets caught in the net. And they have to put in caveats such as allowing people to run private servers and so on and so forth after the game dies in order for them to even make it in the first place. Government-run initiative. I can't back this, dude. I can't. It is too goddamn vague.
I really like how he answers his own critique with the private servers thing, but then calls it a caveat, as if it's some kind of far-fetched concept. Allowing users to run private servers has been done since the 90s. It's completely doable for any dev, let alone companies that have the kind of resources to run company-owned servers in the first place. To act as if this is some kind of unbearable logistics overhead, or worse, to suggest that this would cost them anything significant is ridiculous. Also, why does he call it government-run initiative? What is he trying to say? That this initiative is run by the government? I can't think of anything else he could have meant with that, but that is patently insane and coming out of nowhere. The people behind this initiative are publicly audited in the EU's own site. The representative of the initiative is Daniel Ondruska, a European citizen and business consultant who, by the looks of his LinkedIn, has leagues more experience than Nepo Baby Jason could ever try to draw on MS Paint. Immediately after cobbling together this monstrosity of a point, Jason tries to make it out as if he knows what he's talking about by going to the SKG page and reading off of it, which, by the way, is not the exact same thing as the EU initiative. Even if we act like it is, Jason still manages to put his foot in his mouth by misrepresenting what's written on the SKG site as well.
This right here, intentionally rendering commercial video games inoperable when support ends. Of course, we render them inoperable when support ends because we turn the servers off. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them, but they're not. It's vague, and because it's vague, as that last poster put so eloquently, it's a nail bomb to take out a wasp nest.
Did he forget he just mentioned the possibility of end-user run servers? Or is he keeping up with the act like that's some impossible feat? Even in extreme cases like MMORPG games with leaderboards and in-game market features that are maintained by the company's servers, it would still be better to completely reset all players' progress by having them migrate to a player-run private server than to just shut the game down entirely. Not that that would even be necessary, but even in the worst-case scenario, a private server is better than nothing. It seems that Jason's ability to read exhausts itself after he goes over just 2 lines on the SKG page, and then he starts aimlessly floating through the FAQ section while rambling incoherently.
It doesn't make any damn sense. That's the issue. And we see this all throughout their FAQ. We see it all across this. It is inflammatory language across the board that is vague. And it's going to lead to government overreach because the government doesn't understand how the hell games work. They don't understand how the internet works. They still can't even get a grasp on loot boxes. This is not new. And you're handing them a weapon to start walking through the games industry indiscriminately attacking things when they don't understand. This is a bad direction. Can they change it? I hope so. But here's the thing. They're proposing this, and I hope it doesn't go through. Because what they're doing is too vague and dangerous.
Government overreach. Interesting. How about Nintendo abusing DMCA to take down playthroughs of their games that use emulators? Or Nintendo taking down fan games on the basis of IP law? Is that not government overreach, since Nintendo is directly using legal means provided by the government to antagonize gamers? Or is it only government overreach when the consumer complains? Because I don't even see Jason making a both sides are bad fence-sitting kind of point here. He is fully taking the side of protecting DRM and IP law at all costs. And if you even dare to question it, you are the problem. If not for the government enforcing this top-down system, big-time gaming companies would have to radically shift to the way indie game devs operate. Come to think of it, given that indie games have been beating the ass of AAA gaming for the past few years, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. But, of course, considering any of those things would require Jason's logic to be consistent, Either you are for involvement of regulation in gaming, in which case it makes complete sense to lobby for consumer protection laws, or you're against it, in which case it makes complete sense to lobby for the curtailing of intellectual property laws that give the companies disproportionate power over their games. Taking the middle ground in this debate necessarily means you are wholly and exclusively in support of corporations being able to do what they want to do to the consumer base, with the unwavering support of the government and no legal recourse whatsoever. This is Jason's position. You would think that a guy who chose the name Pirate Software and who talks about how important it is to share information to promote game development wouldn't be so eager to ride or die for DRM. If all of this wasn't bad enough, his chat begins feeding him false information about how SKG is ran by someone who wants to end all live service games and make them single player, and not only does he jump at the bit for it, he smugly begins taking a victory lap on stream before he even confirms it.
Stop Killing Games comes from the guy, live service is a scam. This is not based on vagueness. It is their intention to have all games to be updated to be single player, even if it was an MMO originally. Do you have a source for that information? Because I'm going to be real with you, if that's the case, all of this can eat shit, man. I dropped the mask entirely. I have no qualms about that. If the intention is to turn all live service games into single player games, they can eat my entire ass. I feel like you've said this like 5 times. This is going to be the hot news for the day, dude. It's just going to keep coming up. Keep coming up. The reason that I'm talking about it so much is Sunder, our pants editor, our tailor, is sitting there taking all of this video and turning it into a video so we can put it up on YouTube, so I never have to talk about it again. It'll be great. Yeah. So we basically sacrifice one day of talking about this shit so that anytime anyone ever brings it up again, I go watch that video, bye.
Of course, he had to whip out the classic.
The problem is this. I work in the games industry. I have for 20 years. This looks like a nightmare to me.
I work in the games industry. I have for 20 years.
I did 20.
Eventually, he stumbles his way to actually watching Ross's video, only to make more grossly incorrect and needlessly cynical points against everything Ross says.
What is this? What do you mean Europeans can save gaming? Gaming isn't in need of saving.
I've been working on a campaign to stop the destruction of video games. See, most video games work indefinitely, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, the entire live service game industry does not work that way.
And the entire live service industry is a business model which only a small minority of dev companies can execute due to how expensive and difficult they are to manage. Even if you focus solely on games after 2010, live service games are, by definition, the minority, even if they make account for a lot of overall playtime and revenue for these companies. I think part of what makes Jason mauled so much over live service potentially being threatened is his decades of deathly addiction to MMORPGs like WoW and Path of Exile.
But more and more are being designed to stop working the second support ends from the publisher.
Not just the publisher, the developers as well. It's called a live service game. When we turn the servers off, the game dies because it's all rendered completely on the server side, and we do that specifically for security reasons because if it was all rendered client side, then you'd be able to cheat the game dramatically easier.
I could make the point here that having to figure out how to deal with cheaters is preferable to not being able to play the game at all, but even before completely letting a game die, what can happen is a company keeps it on life support while still neglecting it and allowing problems like botting and cheating to take over. In that case, it's better to just hand the game's source code over to the community and let them figure out the problems, at least in the case that the company is no longer concerned with keeping the game alive and healthy. This is exactly what id Software did with Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake, and what Valve has recently done with Team Fortress 2. It's not that far-fetched or difficult. Now, I'm not going to make you guys suffer and keep listening to Jason reiterate this point over and over again, but to summarize, he creates a false dichotomy. Either things stay as they are and games get completely shut down, delisted, and rendered unplayable, or all companies will have to choose between keeping an unprofitable game alive forever or remake it from scratch as a single-player experience. What Jason fails to comprehend, or more likely, deliberately ignores, is that what Ross is proposing isn't a hypothetical. 10 years ago, there was a private World of Warcraft server, and not only was it running perfectly fine, but it was very popular among the player base who weren't very satisfied with what regular WoW had become. And WoW was run by what company again? Oh yeah, Blizzard Entertainment, famous for once having employed world-renowned hacker Maldavius Figtree for 20 years.
I know how to do that because I worked at Blizzard.
This WoW server wasn't a project in its formative stages, it was fully functional, and Blizzard went out of its way to shut it down for no reason, which earned them a well-deserved heap of backlash.
This one had, it was Blizz-like in every way, perfectly scripted, no donations, it was just for the love of the game. People just wanted to play that game. But Blizzard is such dicks about it!
They didn't even have to do anything. The player base had already taken care of it, and Blizzard still punished them. Perhaps the worst part is that this absolute buffoon actually brings up WoW in his response to Ross.
This would require publishers to leave games they have sold to customers in a working state at the time of shutdown.
How are you going to do that with World of Warcraft? How are you going to do that with any live service game? How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You shut down the servers, and then the game still has to be in a working state. It is an MMO. That is a live service video game. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Can you imagine being this ignorant, yet being so confident? This is a game he is addicted to the point of playing it for literally 24 hours straight. And it's made by a company he used to work at, and he knows nothing about it. I've seen plenty of counter arguments against what Jason is putting forward here, but what I don't see is enough people pointing out that his supposed nightmare scenario is something that has happened before. And not only is it not a nightmare, it only fails to work when the original company sticks its grubby fingers in the pie and destroys everything. Jason's willful blindness is to the point where, after repeatedly yapping about how games would have to be made into single-player experiences, Ross mentions that players can host servers, and Jason just sits there looking dumbfounded, like his brain cannot process what's just been said.
Publishers don't even always have access to the source code. It wouldn't require endless support? No, it would require a shitload of support at the time of transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single-player, rebuilding everything in the entire game. How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Man, is that really going to give the same experience? This shit makes no goddamn sense.
They can end it anytime they want, as far as we're concerned. We wouldn't need to host server.
You're posing this as a benefit. It's going to make the game shit.
They would have to either patch out that requirement or else allow customers to host them privately. Assume any liability for what customers do with their copies of games.
That's all he can do in the face of the one point that unravels his entire argument. Roll his eyes and raise his eyebrows. When he does mention private servers for WoW, it's to make this claim.
So this would not require publishers to assume liability for the customer actions. Except it would. Because every single time that somebody would go off and create a private server, and that private server would have problems. Do you know who gets tickets for it? The parent company that made the original game. Do you know how I know that? Because we got tens of thousands of tickets at Blizzard for private servers for World of Warcraft.
That's pretty interesting to hear from Jason, because on Blizzard's own website, this is what it says. Private WoW servers are against the Blizzard terms of use. If you want to play World of Warcraft, you must download the official game client through the Blizzard app. Blizzard customer support doesn't provide assistance with issues in private servers. Very curious. Well, I guess Jason knows more about Blizzard than Blizzard itself. After all, he worked there for 30 years. His 40 years of experience in Blizzard triumphs Blizzard's own existence, since it's only been active for about 34 years, which frankly pales in comparison to his 50 years of work at Blizzard.
How do you know so many things? I worked at Blizzard for 7 years.
I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is an evil horse who deserved it. The closest thing to a point Jason comes to during all of this is his concern for how this kind of regulation may affect small teams. But then again, Jason could have tailored his point to clarify there should be some kind of exemption for small game dev companies. At no point does he try to engage with what Ross is saying in good faith. Instead, this is how he acts.
If we get enough signatures, then this goes before the European Union to be considered as new law.
I hope it gets shot down. So you're socially engineering politicians that don't know anything about the subject matter to try and push through an initiative about an industry you clearly don't understand to stop killing video games in a way that would kill all live service games. Am I getting that right? I feel like I'm getting that right. Not only do I not want to back this, I'm going to actively tell people not to. That is awful. That is a horrible goddamn direction.
Despite Jason's absolute lack of tact when engaging with the initiative, Ross still took the time to try and ignite a reasonable discussion in the comments of Jason's stream. He wrote, "Based on your response, I think there's a combination of values clash and there's a misunderstanding on much of what we're asking for. For example, WoW would likely be exempt from this measure since it's considered under the law as a true service. In other words, the customer is told explicitly when their access ends at the time of payment. Most live service games do not do this, which could run afoul of EU law. There were many other misunderstandings in your video. It's clear you hate the initiative, and I doubt I would change that, but I would encourage you to at least hate it for what it accurately is. We obviously have very different perceptions of the likely outcome of this. That said, we also have a values clash. You state repeatedly that a game being permanently disabled is not a problem. This is where we very clearly disagree. You're actually the most high-profile person I know of to be adamantly against what we're doing. If you're interested, I would be fine with having a discussion with you on this, where we could at least clarify things, but it's your choice." Jason saw and decided to respond to Ross's comment on a stream, where he said this.
If you're interested, I'd be fine with having a discussion with you on where we could at least clarify things, but your choice. I don't think I want to do that. And the reason why is this. It is because specifically your video that made me not interested in wanting to talk to you. It is specifically this portion of your video, right here, where you discuss reasons why your initiative could pass. And your description of this, I find to be disgusting.
Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies. EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway, and we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it? And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
So politicians are going to put this forward because it's an easy win, they don't understand the subject matter, and it's a diversion from more serious issues. I don't have any respect for that. And I don't have any reason to have a conversation with you because of this.
So his reason for not being open to talking to Ross about it was because Ross displayed a perfectly reasonable degree of cynicism towards politicians' motivations. Even calling it cynicism isn't really fair because Ross is just telling the truth. He's not even mentioning the worst aspect of it, which is that politicians that don't know much about video games are already being weaponized against consumers and have been for decades now. So now Jason isn't only standing on business for corporations, he's also going King Von for the integrity of politicians. How courageous. By the way, while the Ross comment Jason addressed has stayed up, there was another one Ross posted, further clarifying SKG's intentions, but it was deleted by Jason. When confronted about the deletion, Jason replied claiming that deleted comments contained hate speech, personal attacks, and doxing information. The good old hate speech excuse for doing whatever is most convenient for you never fails to show up in these cases, does it? Much like how he strategized his Kickstarter project to trick game journalists into into covering it, some people on Reddit talked about Jason's deletion of comments, claiming that he had previously stated on stream that he purposely deletes people's comments to get them to come back and engage with the videos more, among other petty things of that sort. Keep that in mind, as this kind of behavior will resurface later down the line. On August 5th, another respected representative of game preservation and right to repair causes, Louis Rossman, weighed in on the issue, with a particular focus on the same thing Ross mentioned in his comment: games, which are services but aren't marketed as such. Another important thing he brings up is that the initiative can really be considered less than a draft of what the final legislature will actually reflect, and that's how it should be treated. Otherwise, if the only way to put forth an idea is to already have it fully formed and perfected, then no one can ever put forth any ideas. Lastly, he clarifies that the initiative isn't retroactive, so even if it did eventually become law, it wouldn't require every game ever made to be adapted, and it would only apply to games produced after the law had been passed. Lewis's contribution to the discussion is essentially a bypass of Jason's critiques, and a repackaging of Ross's summary that tailors the message toward game devs with more genuine concerns about how SKG may affect them. All credit to him, he tried to be amicable to Jason's perspective, but the entire gaming community was already ablaze in hatred. That ship had long since sailed. One day after Rossman's video, Jason came back with a video, and this time around, a lot of the cynical energy he displayed in the original stream clip had visibly been beaten out of him. After getting nothing but pats on the back from his community for years, his overnight transformation from cool hacker game dev guy to evil game destroyer hit him pretty hard. He starts the video giving his usual credentials, 60 years working for Blizzard and whatever, and he goes really hard on the angle of, "I'm just a guy trying to help people make games," essentially presenting himself as a victim of an undeserved hate train. I would go over this beat for beat as well, but unfortunately, Jason learned nothing in the several days since this controversy began, and is mostly reiterating his original points, thinking that if he says it in a less mean way, it'll suddenly make sense to people. I don't really understand why he even made a follow-up video if he wasn't open to talking to Ross or anyone else directly, which leads me to think he really just wanted to shift the narrative by saying the same things again, but this time wringing his hands and shrugging a lot. The one notable moment is near the end, when I think he confirms my theory.
Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird.
To have gone through all of this and think that this is still some ploy to destroy all live service games is peak dishonesty. I don't even know why he's not just admitting he was wrong. It wouldn't even really hurt him that much at this point. Under this video, Jason left a comment addressing potential critiques of his argument. The first thing he goes after is the issue of monetization in private servers, where he suggests that having the government prevent it would lead to a lot of red tape. But that red tape already exists. It's called DMCA, and whoever is the rightful owner of the game's IP can file a claim. Even if the company is shut down alongside the game, the IP can still be owned by somebody, whether it's by an individual or another company, in the case that, during its liquidation, the original company sold off its intellectual properties. Now, in the case that the IP became abandonware, then the original IP owner clearly didn't care to preserve it. The only problem with DMCA is that it currently is being abused against people who make free fan games and run private servers for no profit. The other case Jason presents is if people are allowed to monetize, and his counter argument here is even more out of touch. He describes a situation in which a malicious actor uses bots and exploits to kill a game with the intent of firing up their own private server post-mortem to profit off of the game's demise. This is silly because if this malicious actor can profitably run a server of the game, wouldn't it be vulnerable to the same botting and exploits that destroyed the game in the first place? And if this malicious actor can prevent those exploits, can't the company who originally owned the game do the same thing in this scenario? As a matter of fact, isn't it the obligation of a company who provides a live service game to do everything in their power to keep their game intact? I think it's pretty obvious how this hypothetical breaks down on its own, but somehow Jason thought this point was so brilliant, he made an entire follow-up video dedicated to explaining it. The other points aren't nearly as deserving of coverage, just more gallivanting on Jason's part to make him seem like he knows more about this topic than anyone else. Ross eventually tried to communicate again, justifying his cynical stance on why politicians would pick the initiative up, but much like his previous attempts to get through to Jason, it yielded no results. Even in his follow-up video, Jason continues to be dishonest about private server practices.
How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies? Or when a live service game dies. Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense. That's not preservation.
Except that it does make sense, because the aforementioned private WoW server amassed over 800,000 registered accounts, with peaks of 150,000 active accounts in a given week, and over 18,000 concurrent players before it was shut down. Is that a pathetic snapshot of a dead game too? There are AAA live service games being released right now by legitimate companies that can't get 18,000 concurrent players. To give Jason credit, he does acknowledge that there are some private servers that are successful, but he then proceeds to shut it down as not a solution because it opens devs up to abuse, as if he had already established how that would necessarily be the case.
It opens up a route for abuse to the developers, so that is not a solution. Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive.
Another caveat to this whole thing is, what if you don't care that your private server doesn't have a lot of players? I can think of plenty of live service games that you can reasonably play without a ton of players in the same server, which I guess he'd also consider abusive. I suppose a company like Valve, who has a track record of allowing players to run their own servers, has been allowing their users to abuse them for the past 20 years. That's why they're so unprofitable, right?
Like, he's just always in his own world. He really quiet for real unless he know you. He's funny as hell though.
The comments on this video in particular are possibly the most poignant. It's actually pretty simple. If you design your game specifically with anti-consumer practices in mind, don't be surprised when the consumer starts hitting you back. Valve has multiple live service games, and people have always been able to host their own servers however they like. If you are anti-consumer, the consumer is going to be anti-you. Someone even copy-pasted a comment made by the company Running with Scissors, who made the Postal games, which detailed how, despite being an indie company in activity since the 90s, they have always successfully made the basic efforts to keep their games playable indefinitely. And the best part is, they're just one of the many examples of companies who do exactly what Jason tries to paint as impossible, or at least he tries to paint them as too hard for a smaller team to do. Whether it's private servers saving games, fixing their bugs, keeping games alive, promoting modding culture, there's no shortage of examples that run directly counter to everything Jason said in his video. He is simply existing in an alternate reality. In his attempt to be a white knight for developers, he managed to earn literally nothing but universal disapproval, including from other indie devs. On August 9th, right at the heels of all this controversy, the developer of Cruelty Squad made a tweet, which read, "Discovered that YouTube is full of extremely popular game dev videos where the dev authoritatively explains what makes a game good, while simultaneously showing the most boring game you've ever seen." While Jason was never named here, people in the replies immediately recognized this to be about him, especially considering the time frame. Another wrinkle to all of this drama is that just a few months prior to the beginning of this inferno surrounding Jason and Stop Killing Games, an announcement had been made about him being a significant part of a game publishing company called Off-Brand Games. This company just happened to be working on publishing a live service game called Rivals of Aether 2. This is obviously a conflict of interest that Jason never mentioned in any of his tirades against SKG. I must wonder why. But a little while later, the initial momentum of the SKG controversy died down, and Jason played it pretty smart for a guy as invested in online drama as he was. For the rest of the year, the bits of controversies he got involved in were really small in comparison. In late August, he spoke about the Fur Affinity hack and took the opportunity to take a couple of jabs at Kiwi Farms, probably because he knew they were speaking about him. Interestingly enough, he never mentions that he's a furry, which is odd considering the context. In early September, we see EVE Online return, because Jason got into a small issue with the community, where he found himself having to explain his in-game tactics, as bystanders, some of whom were very familiar with the game, speculated that his strategies made literally no sense. Now, you might think that this is meaningless, but he actually got in trouble for a situation just like this right after. While Jason scuttled away from the online community with his tail between his legs, streaming World of Warcraft all day, sometimes for 24 hours straight, the community slowly grew more negative on him. Eventually, it got to the point where it was too much for him to bear, so he started tweeting at his detractors again. But much worse than that, he allegedly started having their videos taken down. Although this began in late August 2024, it's a phenomenon that goes on to this day. The first, at least to my knowledge, was Anno's video on him, which was reported for cyberbullying and harassment. Jason apparently commented on Anno's video and defended himself, which led some to believe he was involved or otherwise responsible in the flagging of the video. Given that this video had a big emphasis on the Emoto story and the sensitive allegations that Jason did something inappropriate with her, let's try to give Jason the benefit of the doubt here and assume the takedown was 100% justified, whether Jason did it or not. The only problem is, soon after, a video by Dr. Copper was taken down, then 2 other videos, and a review of Heartbound, all on the grounds of harassment and cyberbullying. By late October, there were allegedly 15 videos on Jason that got taken down. However, he was met with an obstacle in late January, when he made the mistake of opting to do a DMCA takedown instead of having his community report it for harassment, which led a YouTuber called The Other Frost to cover his case. Frost's video did a really good job of documenting it, so if you want a better breakdown of what happened, you should go watch it. But for the sake of brevity, what happened here is that Brandon Ferrantino, the creator of the game Idle Streaming Bonanza, which contains parodies of multiple popular streamers, used Jason's voice, not in the game, but instead in a personal build of the game for his own entertainment. Brandon then showed this parody of Jason, which contained voice lines from him on stream, much to the entertainment of his audience and the rage of Jason, who promptly filed a DMCA. When Brandon counterclaimed, this is what Jason said.
Hey, Kronos, we have to file a legal complaint against that dude earlier. We're going to take you to court. You're going to lose. You cannot use somebody's likeness or voice in any way inside of your games without their permission. It's a really stupid thing to do. Incredibly so. So I'm going to send this over to Kronos now because he is a lawyer in copyright law. That is his job. Welcome to the Finding Out timeline, bud.
There are 2 things that Jason is lying about here. Firstly, his voice is not actually in the game, and secondly, Kronos, his stream mod, is not a real lawyer. As it turns out, when you're a full-time LARPer, you attract people like you. And Kronos somehow LARPed well enough to convince Jason to try and take Brandon's game down from Steam, despite his voice not actually being in the game. Unfortunately for Jason and Kronos, a real lawyer was peeved by the situation and offered his services to Brandon, free of charge. The lawyer lawyer's name is Mario, and this is what he said. The DMCA you issued was unlawful. You should review the demand letter we sent with an actual U.S. attorney, not a person from Britain who is not admitted to practice law. Basically, this Kronos guy did complete law school in England, but at least at that time, wasn't licensed to practice. In a Substack article from Frost about this, he displayed several Discord messages exchanged between Kronos and Brandon, where, despite Brandon clearly explaining Jason's voice wasn't in the game, he just sticks his head in the ground like an ostrich and acts like he doesn't understand, repeating that the Twitch clip with Jason's voice was evidence that there was a build which violated DMCA. Reading these DMs isn't necessary, but it's pretty funny to see that Kronos has the same habit as Jason of pretending like he's way more formal than he actually is, down to calling Brandon Mr. Ferrantino over Discord. When Mario started talking to Kronos, however, we see a radical shift in tone. So here, Mario says, "I am going to demand that you immediately withdraw, or I may seek damages under Lens v. Universal. That is not a threat. You are not correct, nor should you be dispensing legal advice, as to the 14 days being an absolute shield to liability. I will send legal correspondence. I do believe my conversation with you is at an end, as you are not an attorney, nor does it seem you are authorized to handle a legal matter for Mr. Hall. I will direct correspondence to him directly." And then Kronos says, "We will be withdrawing the DMCA once we have prepared the documentation to do so. We then need to email this to Steam, the platform to which the notice was filed. I do not know what their process is on their end. I recognize you will be sending a letter to Mr. Hall and will inform him accordingly." It turns out we are not in the Finding Out timeline. Or maybe just Jason is. When the legal correspondence came to Jason, he didn't respond. So Mario followed up with more correspondence, prompting Jason not to admit that he was wrong, but instead to make a tweet making up an excuse as to why he withdrew the DMCA. The DMCA was absolutely not unlawful. We filed a DMCA in response to the developer claiming that he put my voice in his video game in a playable build, and he showed evidence of this on video via a Reddit thread. We took down the DMCA notice as he reached out and stated that he would be voice acting the lines instead. You're spreading misinformation in a bias form to generate views. We've handled this through the legal route as is appropriate. In this same tweet, Jason uses the same clip from Reddit of Brandon playing his personal build as evidence that this was a published build, when again, it wasn't. Much later on, Jason made another statement on the situation, this time in the form of a comment under one of his videos addressing all of his recent controversies. But but nothing new is really said here. As for all of the other instances of people's videos on him getting taken down, to this day, he maintains that he is not responsible for it. While all of this slowly unfolded, another minor side controversy also took place, where Jason made a video coming out in support of the game engine Godot, as they were going through some turbulence at the time. Basically, here's what happened. Godot's official Twitter account made a tweet signaling the support of their engine being used to make woke games. Their words, not mine. A lot of gamers weren't particularly happy about this, and most of them replied to the tweet, asking them to keep politics out of it. In turn, the Godot Twitter account started blocking people left and right, which led people to figure out who was the manager of the Twitter account, only to confirm their suspicions that it was a very politically inclined person, and that the tweet was very intentional. Simultaneously, as people in Godot's own community server started getting banned for taking issue with the tweet, users did some research on the moderator who was responsible for these bans, Xananax, who apparently used to say the N-word a lot on Discord.
You and I are not so different.
The one caveat to this aspect of the story is that the server that Xananax modded for was not technically official, although it was frequently linked on Godot's own website as if it was. So for all intents and purposes, the server at least used to be Godot's community server. While the situation already didn't look great, the Xananax messages forced Godot's hand to apologize for the woke games tweet, although they maintain that the Discord server the mod was in wasn't official. Now, despite the apology, they continued to regularly block people, not just on Twitter, but also on GitHub, which prevented people from getting updates to the engine. This is a particularly questionable move, since Godot is heavy on their reliance on donations and financial support from its user base. During all of this, Jason noticed how big this thing was and decided to pitch in to basically reiterate Godot's official statements in a more didactic and vague way, so that people would question it even less. Of course, Xananax's random Discord messages from years ago aren't officially representative of Godot, even if the Discord server was vaguely tied to them. Based on what we see here, the worst they did was block people frivolously, which may have affected some donors. Ultimately, this means their loss, as sponsors who aren't into this kind of political signaling will pull out.
I think I know what's happening. I think woke is dead.
Strangely enough, one of the sponsors who pulled out was none other than Moldavius Figtree himself, whose Pirate Software logo mysteriously disappeared since this controversy. But all of this stuff was peanuts compared to what was about to happen. In January 2025, Jason was playing Hardcore WoW, which is a version of the game where if you die, you lose your character. During one of his streams, his party ended up getting more attention from aggro mobs than initially intended, so they decided to collectively flee. Now, I don't actually play World of Warcraft, but I'm going to do my best to summarize what happened here. The thing about fleeing in WoW is that the mage plays a significant role in it, as mages have the ability to crowd control mobs. Jason was a mage, so this was his responsibility, but instead, he spammed a spell called Blink, which teleported him way ahead of the rest of the party, leaving them to die. When confronted about his conduct, he claimed he had no mana, and thus couldn't have helped his party, despite having multiple items that would restore his mana and allow him to help his party.
That is outrageous, dude. You can't blame me for that shit. You make a bad pull, you make a bad call, that's on you.
He also lied and claimed his spells didn't have crowd control ability, and blamed everyone else for the deaths of their characters. Now, it may sound very silly that this was even a controversy. I mean, he was playing video games with other people. It's fake, who cares, right? But this actually is an important stepping stone to understanding the downfall of Pirate Software. It wasn't his screw job itself that sealed his fate. Instead, it was his compulsive inability to take responsibility. As surprising as it may sound, this botched hardcore WoW run ignited a hate wave that I think was even greater than when he opposed Stop Killing Games, at least initially. He eventually made a tweet that presents itself as an apology, but when you look under the hood, it's anything but. He blames everyone else in the party for also having made mistakes, and makes sure to remind everyone that he is indeed a former Blizzard employee.
Pirate Software, don't mention you're an ex-Blizzard employee challenge.
Impossible.
This tweet got to 4 million views, and he deleted the original bot of him playing WoW, almost as if he was trying to sweep it under the rug entirely. Due to Jason's inability to just take the fault, Soda Poppin', who is another streamer and the leader of their guild, which was called OnlyFangs, came forward on his Discord server and said this: I made the decision to kick Pirate from the guild. I felt a large majority of people in the guild felt uncomfortable playing or being around him, and all that drama that surrounded him at this point. Even though some people may not have felt that way, a lot did. And after seeing some clips today from him, quadrupling down, or I don't know what number we're on at this point, I think I'm making the right decision. But still, I feel bad. Try to just let this whole thing slide into forgetfulness and move on. Stay safe, gamers. This is about as polite as soda poppin' could be, but clearly, it still got under Jason's skin, leading him to make this passive-aggressive tweet about it, followed by him suggesting that the entire guild was ganging up on him and being toxic. The news about this made its way back to Ross, who was still trying to promote Stop Killing Games. And this is what he said.
If you're against Stop Killing Games, and it's because of what you heard from Pirate Software, I think he represented Stop Killing Games as accurately as he represented his behavior in World of Warcraft and towards the World of Warcraft community. Yeah, like he said, the guild he was in was something like it was built on hate, and from what I saw the guild, it didn't look like that. It looked like they're built on trying to have a wild time or something, like, you know. So yeah, I guess one thing that is a little frustrating on my end is that there seems to be very little cross connections between people realizing what he did in World of Warcraft versus realizing he basically did the exact same thing earlier in Stop Killing Games. And it would be really great if we could kind of bridge those a little.
This whole thing brought the levels of skepticism toward Jason to new heights, and people began combing through his recent content, detecting something strange.
I watched his Animal Well playthrough. Okay, I watched the whole thing, but it was on second monitor. And I liked the video. And I remember thinking in the video, I was like, damn, he's good at puzzles, man. I was like, if I was doing this, I'd be stuck. That's what I remember thinking, okay? And then, during this drama, I'm like reading some of the comments on this WoW drama, and somebody offhandedly mentioned that he faked it, that he like looked up a guide, that he like was clearly, like he says things that happen before he gets there, and he like, and I don't know if that's true, but I rewatched some part of the video, and with that knowledge, it looked so much different to me. So I'm not saying anything. This is not, I don't know. All I'm saying is I wish someone smarter than me could look into it.
What you just saw was male pattern baldness representative, What you just saw was Glizzy Enjoyer, that's not right. What you just saw was a streamer named Atrioc calling attention to this question, and he got what he wanted because people started looking into it. During his gameplay of Outer Wilds, which was specified in the title to be a blind long play, meaning he's playing the game without backseat gaming from the chat and without looking at guides, people noticed that whenever he got stuck in a part of the game, he started looking at his phone, until suddenly he had an epiphany of how to solve the puzzle. Eventually, people did the same thing to the long play that Atrioc had watched, which was Animal Well, and once again, the same pattern of behavior appeared, with Jason suddenly getting eureka moments and solving things in an instant without ever working for the solution. He eventually caught wind that people were noticing and claimed he was playing games on his phone or texting.
Why did you cheat in Outer Wilds? What? How the hell would you cheat in that game? Bro, we played it all live on stream. All right, bud. It's a wild-ass thing to say. You were typing and they assumed you were Googling? No? I was probably playing Monster Hunter. Like, I've been playing that shit on phone for ages. I always keep it right here. Unless I was typing to somebody or texting to somebody. I don't freaking know.
Yeah, okay. Perhaps the most glaring example of him accidentally slipping up and revealing he prepared for a playthrough beforehand was his playthrough of Tunic, where he repeatedly managed to read messages written in the game's cryptic language without a reference sheet, or reference parts of the game that he hadn't reached yet as if he knew them beforehand. Maybe he was sick of making a fool out of himself while gaming, so Jason decided to return to another one of his supposed fortes, hacking, although that didn't go that well either. In the midst of doing one of his masterclass demonstrations, he thinks that he's figured out some kind of cyber attack involving something called a jump box, while inadvertently admitting on stream that he just walked into a VPN called Tunnel Bear without realizing he did.
Provider's Tunnel Bear. The name is digitalocean.com. Server for rent. Yeah, server for rent. 100%. Normal stuff. So, likely this is a rented server from a dude that's using this for text. There's your attacker. There's his jump box. We have his jump box.
The negative feedback was just mounting more and more, and in order to stave it off, Jason was banning people in his chat by the thousands. 30,000 to be specific.
At first it started because they didn't like my take on a political initiative, and now it's turned into how much money can I milk out of this. So, have fun.
Okay.
322 already? Yeah. No, resets every day, yeah.
Oh, you're going to hear a number that he keeps calling out that's going to get bigger and bigger. That is the amount of bans that they are doing on people in his stream at that point. It actually gets over 1,000 for this day.
Consequently, his stream, which used to bring in over 20,000 concurrent viewers, had dwindled to less than 8. It's still a very good number, but judging from how quickly the number was dropping, it wasn't looking good. Additionally, Steam itself became one of Jason's detractors at this point, since in February 2025, they implemented notifications to early access games that notified potential buyers of how little a game was being updated. And unsurprisingly, Heartbound was hit with it. And this looks particularly grim, since his game was now flooded with negative reviews that Steam deemed legitimate and not the result of gratuitous review bombing. So, with nothing safe from the vitriolic hatred of trolls, what was left for Jason? Well, malding on Twitter, which had become a regular pastime of his at this point. While most of it isn't worth any attention, there is one in which he refers to his 12+ hour streams just a couple of lines before he tells someone to go outside. Insane behavior.
Do you do anything to maintain your physical fitness? I touch grass, my dude. I go outside. Yeah. Yeah.
Just so you know that this clip isn't out of context, he elaborated on it as well.
How about workout? I have to work the land here. So there's a lot of land, and I have to do things in it. I also have to keep weights next to my desk so that I don't turn into a slug human. So anytime I'm doing meetings, I'm using these. Because it's important.
I don't mean to make fun of someone for how little they can lift, but that 2.5 pound dumbbell is not standing in the way of any slug transformation. If early 2025 was bad for him, from March onward, he started plummeting at freefall speed. The first thing to go was the last glimmer of hope for Heartbound, as people noticed that he'd been saying the third chapter of the game was 97% finished since 2023. But by April 2025, not only was the chapter still not finished, but he even managed to not put out the monthly hotfix quote-unquote update. Keep in mind, he only adopted his monthly update ethos in January 2025, right around when Steam started putting notices of slow updates for early access games, which affected Heartbound. This means that just 3 months into despair updating his game to keep it from being punished by Steam, he was already failing to fulfill his promise just a couple of months later. And on the 11th, many days past his monthly update deadline, he announced that he was having internet problems. All of this is quite ironic, considering this is the kind of stuff he was saying on stream.
I don't break my promises to my players. Because if I did, then I wouldn't be making games, right? They would show me very quickly, like I have a whole section on this. You are never above your community, and you are never too important to spend time responding to them. The moment you think you are, they will show you how untrue that really is. Don't forget that, and I mean that. If I screw them over, if I lie to them about this stuff, then they are well within the right to tear me down, and they have every ability to do so, because I don't exist without them.
He is technically right because he's A, not making games, and B, he is being torn down. In the same month he missed the update, Kronos announced Jason was beginning to work on a new game, and that he'd be accepting unpaid concept art from volunteers, in exchange for being credited. What a steal. If anyone dared point out that he spent all of his time streaming and getting into Twitter drama instead of making his game, he just accused them of not being a genuine buyer. Even his own Discord members were complaining about how little work got done on Heartbound, while Jason kept starting new projects like podcasts. The saddest part is that there are people so under his spell that they continue to white knight him. When a member of his Discord said Jason spent 15 hours a day playing video games, someone actually corrected him, saying Jason only played video games for 12 hours a day. Wow, that's so much better and more productive. Then, people say that Jason works on Heartbound off-stream to avoid spoiling the game's story, despite Jason himself previously expressing that spoiling Heartbound wasn't a concern due to how many routes the game had.
Also, do you worry about spoilers when developing games on stream? I don't worry about spoilers for Heartbound, and the reason why is because I have thousands of routes in the game. And because I have thousands of routes, what you see on stream is a very small piece of a very large iceberg. And that's when I'm able to build things in stream.
5 minutes later.
Someone asks, why do you work on this off stream? Because it's full of spoilers. There's so many things in this that I don't want to show to people, or things that just aren't ready, that if I show you on stream, it's just going to ruin pieces. Like, likely you'll never see those locations, but in the off chance you would, I don't want you to be spoiled.
Kiwi Toothpick with 569 bits said NPNP, they deserve it.
I think it's worth taking an aside here to mention that pretty much all of the turmoil Jason had experienced up until this point probably could have been avoided if he just didn't get into drama. If he spent, let's say, 6 hours a day streaming and the rest of the day working on Heartbound, while his coding would probably still be pretty amateur and bad, he would actually finish the game at some point, I assume. But instead, it seems like he can't help himself but get caught up in all of these weird little controversies. Controversies that ultimately don't make him look good and don't benefit him in any way. Now, in late April, Jason gave an update to his Discord where he said, "Honestly, the amount of negativity when I do release content for the game doesn't really make me want to work on it more than I am. The amount of people acting like the world has ended over an update being delayed on a $10 indie game that's been in development 4 years is absurd at best and more than likely just a means to bash me at this point. If you're so invested that you act like an asshole over it, go somewhere else. It's not a means to bash you. It's a reason to bash you. And the people who paid for it aren't gonna go somewhere else. You owe something to them. They paid for a product and they never got it.
If I screw them over, if I lie to them about this stuff,
then they are well within the right to tear me down, and they have every ability to do so.
You gotta go over there. The guy's not returning your phone calls. I know, they miss a payment. They start acting like they're doing you a favor if they give you anything. And then you're gonna spend all your time hounding them. You gotta get your arms around this thing.
In the meantime, streamers who tried to play the game in its current state noticed that despite all the hotfix updates, the game was still fundamentally broken, as you could corrupt your save file by pressing the spacebar in menus or during cutscenes, apparently because the spacebar was the quick save button. The Steam reviews reflected the situation pretty appropriately. After so many years, I forgot about this game. Seems the developer did too. 7 years past the original release date, updates consist mostly of added some dialogue, which then is being listed scene by scene on the Steam updates to inflate the otherwise empty patch notes. Developer is openly hostile to any criticism, bans anyone who dares to not pat him on the back or kiss his ass. It makes no sense for a 2D RPG story-rich game to have these extremely minimal, barren monthly updates. While he generally didn't engage with the negative reviews, when someone brought up a sensitive topic, he went out of his way to respond. Such was the case when a user brought up how inconvenient and pointless his Steam achievement-based DRM to prevent piracy actually was, considering it was for an unfinished 2D RPG Maker game with not that much public interest. Jason instantly locked the topic on Steam and gave a one-line response saying that he had no interest in adapting the game for platforms outside of Steam. While the updates eventually started coming out again, it was more of the same, with no third chapter in sight. Heartbound, along with Jason's reputation as a game dev, was dead and buried. And the final nail in the coffin was a YouTuber named Coding Jesus, who released some videos reviewing Heartbound's code and concluding that the game is simply unfinishable. These code reviews turned into a whole situation of their own, as Jason's fans apparently tried to take Coding Jesus' videos down.
They've started brigading my channel and mass reporting videos on multiple platforms. Since neither Jason nor his fans have actual arguments against my videos, they resort to smears, ad hominems, and shady tactics in order to get the videos removed. This video in particular, debunking Jason's ray tracing solution for his 2D game, was flagged as selling illicit goods.
Many people believe that this game will never be finished. Every day, it's looking less and less likely that the third chapter will ever come out, and the fourth and fifth are beyond consideration. The game is so doomed that its Wikipedia page has recently been deleted, and that's because the majority of the wiki was made by him, causing an obvious conflict of interest. But as bad as this is just the first jab that led to Jason's ultimate knockout. The second jab was an interview, or maybe consultation he did, with content creator psychologist Dr. K. You guys probably know who Dr. K is. He's interviewed a lot of different Twitch streamers and decided to basically psychoanalyze them on a live stream. And honestly, I have no idea why Jason chose to do this, but here's a snippet of how the conversation went when the topic of Jason's arrogance was brought up.
I think sometimes the things that I talk about in regards to those types of things is misconstrued as arrogance or boasting, when in reality I'm just trying to give context.
So that is the problem right there. So I want you to listen to this phrase. Sure. This gets misconstrued as arrogance, but in reality, it's this. Yeah. That is the most arrogant statement on the planet, bro. Like, tell me I'm wrong.
Okay. I don't see it that way, but all right.
Right? So, oh yeah, so you don't see it that way. You're wrong. No. Right? I'm right. So you're subjectively, you're thinking you have blind spots. You're wrong. Like, I'm objective and you're subjective.
During this interview, Dr. K kept trying to probe into the controversies that Jason was involved in to try and understand what processes led to his current situation, and Jason kept feeding him incomplete answers. Dr. K picked up on this and pointed it out as blind spots in his narrative, but ultimately he never managed to cut through, as Jason couldn't wrestle his way out of his defensive delusion.
Right, so we heard a long story from you. Even if it's congruent with reality, one word of what you did wrong, smug, and then 99 words of what other people did wrong. Even if it's correct, I'll agree that it's correct. My point is that when a human being shows up and says, I did one tiny thing wrong and everyone else did 99 things wrong, the reception that they're going to receive is not going to be pleasant.
The thing is I don't know if that's always the case.
One is, once again, this pattern of the more I do something right, the more wrong someone appears to be. Right? So I tried to listen to them. They became more unhinged. They became more unbending. So that can absolutely be the case. But do you see how this is another scenario where you behaved correctly and someone else behaved incorrectly?
I feel like that is an incorrect response, because the first thing that'll be brought up is they always say, well, you didn't accept any blame. I go, here's in this post.
No. What did you hear me say?
Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah. So I'm just pointing. Your statement was, I tried to listen to people and they became more unhinged.
Yeah.
So I want you to code
people that are still.
No, don't worry about the people. Hold on.
Okay.
Code that sentence. Look at the grammar of that sentence.
Because it's objective.
I did something right and they did something wrong. That's the way. That's what I hear when you say those words. And this could be where your disconnect is. I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I'm just saying, here's another statement that you made. I tried to talk to people. They're crazy.
I don't think... I think there's an objective reality there, though. When someone comes in and says, you didn't take any accountability for this, and I go, here in this post I said I did this wrong, here on this video I said I did this wrong, and they go, that never happened. Like,
okay.
What am I supposed to do with that?
Very good. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay? So, I know it's crazy. I know it's crazy. Okay, so bear with me, Thor. Try. Don't reach out. Focus.
As Dr. K was gridlocked by Jason's unbreakable narc aura, their conversation came to a dissatisfactory ending. The gist of it is Jason overemphasizes the instances in which he's justified and others are wrong, and minimizes every instance where that's not the case. Even if he acknowledges them, he plays them down, like the WoW situation. While remaining mostly technically correct about the details, this is a kind of doublespeak, using tiny morsels of truth to convey an overall dishonest narrative while ignoring what goes against it. A month later, this second jab was followed by a devastating cross. But in order to get it, we have to establish a tiny bit of context. Back in February, Jason made a video retreading the wingless Emoto drama about Second Life, among other controversies. Although he correctly explains that him and Emoto were on good terms, and that nothing illegal ever happened during that situation, he leaves out some key details about why this was even brought up in the first place. One key component of the testimonies from other SL people was that he was a freaky furry, as we covered much earlier in the video. However, there's no mention of this in the video whatsoever. But why is this relevant? Well, because people realize that although Jason did his damnedest to completely erase any trace of him taking part in the furry community from the internet, this same effort was not carried out by his significant other, Shay. Shay's Second Life profile, which was still up, listed Jason as partner, and listed the groups they were a part of. One of these groups was TDAC Wild Dogs, a group for ferals to congregate. Now, a feral is a furry who prefers their sona to have the anatomy of an animal, as opposed to anthros who prefer their sonas to be humanoid. A lot of people found this concerning because a cursory look through Shay's accounts on other furry websites lead to a fur affinity account named Necrophile. This account not only identifies Shay by name, but has a picture of Shay as the profile ID. Now, if you check the gallery of this fur affinity account, as to be humanoid. A lot of people found this concerning because a cursory look through Shay's accounts on other furry websites lead to a fur affinity account named Necrophile. This account not only identifies Shay by name, but has a picture of Shay as the profile ID. Now, if you check the gallery of this fur affinity account, you immediately find a lot of not safe for work art, some of them depicting animals in diapers, or otherwise, they're clearly meant to be children. This page has since been hidden by Shay. All of this is to establish that both Shay and Jason are unconventional, to say the least, when it comes to intimate relations. This brings us to the Lyric Wolf allegations. Before I even get into it, I'd like to preface it with the fact that Lyric Wolf was not a minor, and no criminal charges have ever been brought against Jason for sexual impropriety. Over a long Twitter thread and an accompanying website, Lyric claims that Jason and Shay worked together to have Lyric commit to an exclusive relationship with Jason, despite this degree of commitment not being shared by him. These efforts supposedly culminated in Thor being intimate with Lyric Wolf in a hotel room during TwitchCon. A day later, when Lyric was walking around with Shay, but Jason wasn't there, Shay mentioned he had a secret wife. This supposed secret wife would then be a third person Jason was simultaneously with during this time. When Lyric brought this up to Jason, he instantly became standoffish and hostile, although he didn't exactly deny he had a wife either. Lyric then went back to Shay and communicated what happened, but in the process of doing so, Shay discovered that Jason had been intimate with Lyric, which apparently was a violation of whatever relationship arrangement this kind of thing is, where Jason was supposed to communicate whenever he'd be with someone else. Now, after they fell apart, Lyric admittedly lied to PayPal to make a chargeback to a donation he'd made to the Pirate Software Studios, and Jason responded by making a DMCA against Lyric's YouTube channel, which culminated in some public back and forth that never got any attention. Both of Jason's responses from 2019 and 2025 focus exclusively on the fraudulent chargeback and Lyric allegedly doxing his phone number when sending their conversation to someone else. Whatever the case may be, the extremely extensive chat logs Lyric uploaded seem legitimate and contained original pictures of Jason found in them that cannot be found available online. Additionally, Lyric shared court records that prove Jason was indeed married at the time this story took place. While these claims ultimately aren't that scathing, Jason clearly put forth an inordinate amount of effort toward maintaining a furry ERP harem exclusively committed to him while keeping all of it a secret. But despite not being too damning as far as accusations go, you can imagine how this further lowered his standing in the public eye. If the previous controversy was a KO, this whole thing was a hammer fist follow-up shot. If he ever had a chance to regain his audience, that chance was quickly slipping. Fortunately, not all was bad, because his catastrophic downfall served as fuel for the Stop Killing Games campaign, as 1 year after their initial clash, Ross decided that, as the deadline for the EU petition was approaching, it was time to finally put his thoughts about pirate software into a video. As it turns out, despite how much Jason's anti-Stop Killing Games campaign was a PR nightmare for him, he enjoyed sort of a Pyrrhic victory against SKG, as according to Ross, Jason's video was effective in drying up the initiative signatures. Despite how justified Ross was, he was simply way smaller than Jason was at the time, and for all intents and purposes, SKG was doomed to fail. Or was it? Well, if this was purposeful on Ross's part to get Jason talking about it again, it worked, as Jason made a tweet doubling down on his original stance in as ignorant a way as ever, explicitly saying he will never talk to Ross and considers the entire thing rage bait. Jason immediately regretted this decision and took his tweet down, crying and complaining to his hug box about the hate, but it was too late. The same day this little exchange was going down, none other than Moist Critical decided to signal boost SKG to the tune of a little under 4 million views, which poured gasoline, paint thinner, and lighter fluid on the fire of support for SKG and hatred for pirate software. After taking down his tweet, Jason also took down his stream and fired up another one to get rid of any of his engagement with the Ross video, which is kind of funny considering this clip.
Never accept responsibility? No, I 100% accept responsibility for my own words. That's why I left those videos up and I'm not taking them down.
As his audience was simply not large enough to counteract all the negative feedback he got whenever he streamed or tweeted, he holed himself up in his Discord server where he melted down for the rest of the day. Eventually, he went back on Twitter to double down on his stance, not out of courage to stand up to the majority, but instead because he has no other motives in his repertoire. Among his reiteration of his points, he blatantly lied and claims he never took any of his videos down, which Ross pointed out in a reply. While Jason initially tried to claim internet outages were responsible for the vanishing VODs, he randomly removed this line and claimed instead he took down the VOD because of harassment. What's pretty interesting here is despite saying many times he would never be willing to engage with Ross, Jason kept replying to him on Twitter, fishing for a gotcha moment that never came. This means that he was perfectly okay with engaging with Ross. He's just not not okay with doing it on stream. During this period, Jason was extremely tense and sensitive during streams, banning anyone he even suspected was going to be negative towards him.
EDAGFTDNADGFSNM with $10 said you should remember what Dr. K.
Enough.
Within 1 day of his first video on SKG, Charlie made a second video, this time focusing more on Jason.
Anyway, he did delete that tweet, but just a little while ago, he made a new tweet, a very long tweet, as well as a series of tweets under it in regards to this whole thing. And in all these words, all this mumbo-jumbo, not once does he say he was wrong about anything. In fact, he just continues to double down, even proudly stating he is doubling down. Wow, how incredibly noble, doubling down on things you are provably, blatantly wrong about. And it prompted me to reach out directly to him, to talk to him, to see, like, why isn't he acknowledging that? Is there a reason? Like, what is going on there? So I did. He made it very clear he was not very happy with my coverage of Stop Killing Games, which is fine. I think that's totally fine. I'm not going to leak DMs or really go in depth on our private conversation, but the point of me reaching out to him was to talk about his refusal to acknowledge that he did, maybe unintentionally, misrepresent Stop Killing Games, and it led to a just shy of 2 hours, like, circular argument that ultimately got us nowhere. He was more focused on his qualms with Stop Killing Games and really liked to challenge me to prove him wrong about some of his hang-ups with it. We got nowhere.
Despite Charlie making it a point to mention he wasn't going to leak their DMs, the first thing Jason did upon the release of the video was leak their DMs to his Discord server. Given Charlie mentions that Jason repeatedly tried to get him to challenge him, I think what Jason intended to get out of this from the first moment he made contact was getting a debate stream with Charlie. When that didn't happen, and Charlie nonchalantly put him down in a video, which was pretty fair considering Jason's attitude, he settled for the next best thing, villainizing him in his hug box. If you actually read what Jason is saying here, he's complaining that Charlie didn't just continue to talk to him about this indefinitely, as if the two were friends, which may have been what Jason wanted ultimately. After all, for a year at this point, he did everything to avoid talking to someone about SKG directly. But when Charlie, one of the people with the most clout online, reached out, suddenly he's talking. A few days after this controversy involving Charlie went down, former Blizzard dev designer Dave came out in support of SKG. Finally, a real Blizzard dev with over 20 years of experience. This guy actually did 20 years too. Unbelievable.
First and foremost, as a game designer, I have a vested interest in my work remaining in the public eye in some fashion. I honestly don't care if it's pirated or sold without any compensation returning to me, because pretty much everything I've worked on is pirated or sold without any compensation for me. So, what I care about is that people get to play and enjoy that work. What Stop Killing Games is trying to do is change EU laws that are currently vague, which allow companies to abandon their games while the people who purchase them may never be able to play them again without some form of piracy. All that the initiative desires to do is to require these companies to have some form of end-of-life measures so that people who paid money for these games can continue to play them long after the development team is laid off.
Hearing from people with actual boots-on-the-ground knowledge speak on this topic is like water to a man dying of thirst in the desert. Next came the YouTube channel GNCA, who collabed with Ross to promote SKG. Then, a KF user named Definitely Not Me made a design for a pro-SKG poster based on the guy from Postal, and the studio behind the Postal games retweeted it and officially supported the movement, leading to memes such as this one.
Hi there, would you like to sign my petition?
Not only do I not want to back this, I'm going to actively tell people not to.
Then, PewDiePie and Jacksepticeye made community posts mobilizing their audience to go sign the petition, with Jack making an entire YouTube video promoting the initiative, which now sits at over 1 million views, where he mentions Pirate Software by name.
Someone like Pirate Software has gone out and done a horrible video on it, misrepresenting what it is.
It's almost unbelievable to see the sheer volume of support for not just the initiative, but also for Ross. He was basically screaming about this for 5 years and having to put up with people like Pirate Software trying to dunk on him for it before the initiative ever saw any significant success. The first benefits of this wave first hit the localized UK petition, which within just a couple of weeks skyrocketed from 16,000 signatures all the way to the required 100,000, which meant it would be brought before the parliament. When this happened, the company Jason was working working for at the time, Off-Brand Games, started suffering consequences for its association to Jason, to the point where Ross posted to Reddit asking for people not to punish the company and its games for Jason's stupidity. Unsurprisingly, he got fired or stepped down from the company and profusely mauled about it on Discord, while he banned anyone that mentioned anything negative in his Twitch chat. As he clammed up completely and his sycophantic followers continued to make increasingly delusional responses to criticism, the collective efforts of Reddit, Kiwi Farms, European gamers, and gamers in general, and a number of YouTubers who went out of their way to support the movement, and probably most importantly, the continuous efforts of Ross over the course of half a decade, Stop Killing Games managed to rally a massive amount of support. In May, they were just a few months away from their deadline and only had 400,000 signatures, 1 million signatures away from the goal. It looked like it was over. But you know what they say about what's inside every "it's over"?
In the midst of "it's so over," I found there was, within me, an invincible "we're so back."
In under 2 months, the glistening, white-hot hatred of hundreds of thousands of people for one smarmy, furry pseudo-game dev made itself manifest. And just like that, by July 3rd, the initiative got to over 1 million signatures. Just as Ross published his major update to the campaign, Louis Rossmann re-entered the fold and started avidly promoting and donating to his cause, followed by none other than the original creator of Skibbity Toilets. With this final push, the initiative met its final destination: 1,400,000 verified signatures. While this was all just literally an initiative, it's a major step forward in a conversation that just wouldn't have happened were it not for an extremely unlikely set of circumstances: the perfect storm. Now, after this happened, there were a few developments to Jason's online presence. Since his game is probably dead and his popularity on YouTube was well on its way to meet the same fate, he had made his last stand on Twitch, but even that has started to look sour. For the time being, this is probably one of the best outcomes this story could have. SKG succeeded, and Ross is drawing a lot of eyes to the right places, while Jason, not Thor, Hall's online presence has been relegated to his Twitch worshippers, a number of people which seems to be dwindling to this day. With that, I've been Turkey Tom. Thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.
We have a new shirt available at turkeytom.shop. This is the